Okay, so we are here with our third and final interview, in which we are sitting down with Sheila Kittleson, who is the director of the W. And we'll get this turned around because we are conducting this live.
Great.
You can adjust that if you need to,
That's
Sheila.
okay. That's all good.
Want to get started, Aaron?
Yeah. So can you kind of, for an introduction, tell us your role at the W
Sure.
as well as some of your daily responsibilities?
I will do that. My role here at the W is the director of the facility. I also am the senior women's administrator for the athletic group. I don't know if you guys want me to talk about that as well, or I could throw things in.
Sure.
I mean, it's all part of what I have to do and part of what I need to fit into my day, or days, I guess. My role really, by saying that, titles to me don't mean a lot of things. So the things that I work on every day are, sometimes it's whatever comes up. But ultimately, my responsibility is for the entire building as far as safety, everything that goes on in the building, programming, hiring, firing. We obviously, the rest of the staff have their responsibilities as well. But ultimately, it falls on me, I guess, to do things right and to run the business, basically, so to speak. I'm responsible for membership, profitability, budget management, controlling the budget, watching what we spend, deciding what to spend it on. There's a operational budget that we spend that allows us to replace and repair equipment, things like that. There's also a capital budget that I work with that I decide what large pieces of equipment that need to be replaced. So I work with probably about 3 to 5 years out. I know like what equipment out in the fitness area needs to be replaced and when. Longer term, when do we need to replace the wall? What types of things have to be done with that? So kind of that bigger picture of 5 years out, what do we need for capital expenditure as well as our normal annual expense budget. I work on the financial piece of it, so I do the reporting that goes to the business office. I'm going to look at my notes if that's okay. I think one of the things that I work on every day, or I think about every day, is how do I make this place better? How do we make this place better? There's always something that we can improve on that's going to help you guys as students, the student athletes, community members, our youth, whatever that might look like. We serve anywhere from, infant in our child care area, all the way up to 95 plus who come in here and work out on a regular basis. So there's always something we can do little bit better. Safety, I think I mentioned that already. That's one of my top priorities in the building. And the other thing I do is I feel that I spend a large amount of time probably supporting the rest of the group, not necessarily doing their jobs for them, but being here to support them. If there's questions, concerns, things that need to be done that they need a little help with, I'm certainly there to help them with that. Responding to customers on a regular basis. I've had 3 or 4 walk through the door already today with comments, concerns, things that they wanted to talk to me about. Actually, I had a prop. I just gave it away. A lady today brought me in the cover of one of the soap dispenser things. Mm-hmm. She literally took it off the wall, the cover off of it, and put it on my desk, water and all, and said, "There's mold in this." And I told the group on Monday that it needed to be taken care of. I'm like, all right, we'll take care of that. So that's a new one. That's first for that one. But certainly that's a big part of my day, interacting with our members, getting feedback, trying to, make things right when we have things that aren't going right. You see. Generally, I've got multiple balls in the air at any one time. There's always piles, and they always all mean something to me. It usually means something in progress that's not quite done yet. So those are my daily responsibilities. I did write down, just out of curiosity today, what I worked on, just so I could share some of that with you guys as you guys asked that question. So one of the first things that I worked on was, that's not the right list. See, multiple lists. I didn't do that one. Maybe I won't be able to tell you today. Alright, I can't find that one right now. Jeez, I just wrote that stuff down. I'll find it. We'll talk about it. Oh, here it is. I'm not that unorganized normally either. So one of the first things that I worked on when I came in was the Family Fun Fair and the Health Fair. Those are two of the events that, one of the events we put on, the Health Fair, and the Family Fun Fair is an event that we just participate in. We have to have like a booth for the Family Fun Fair, and we also have to have an activity for students, kids that they can do while they're there. And so I worked with Heidi, one of our interns, on working on what we're going to do for that, because that event's this Saturday. So we worked on that a little bit, including some of the handouts that we were going to provide for that event. Payroll, we're down one staff right now, so I will a little bit more payroll activity than I used to in the past. So I worked on getting people's payroll in and getting that right, so that we didn't mess with the one thing that means the most in a lot of cases to people. Soap dispenser, I shared my soap dispenser story with you. We have an employee right now who we're dealing with maybe not quite as honest of a person as they need to be. So Steve and I spent some time talking about what we were going to do in that situation. Looking back at some time, the record of the time versus when we know the person was probably in the building. So we spent some time looking at that. It's not you, so don't worry about it. And that doesn't happen often, but it does occasionally happen. So that actually took quite a bit of time today. One of the things we're very careful about when we start looking into those things is to make sure that we're right, so that if we talk to the employee or the person, we know that it's not false accusations, that we have some proof to back it up. So we spent some time looking for the proof, just to make sure that when we have the conversation, we have all of our facts in a row and it's a meaningful conversation. The other thing that I spent a little bit of time with this afternoon is the ETK large event for the fall. They're looking for a space for it again. And it sounds like they're thinking about doing it in Levick again, so trying to narrow down some dates that would work in that space around our volleyball and basketball teams. I spent some time upstairs looking at that. And corporate billing, we partner with some companies, corporate partnerships that we have, where I report the billing, or I report attendance to them. Regard for their staff, I guess, so that they can pay them accordingly on whatever their plan is. So it takes me a couple hours every month to get that done and send off. The other large one that we do is with a couple of insurance companies. There are several insurance carriers that pay for the health benefits for the people who have their insurance, and we're partners with them, so those people don't pay a membership fee here, and that'll go away eventually. They don't pay a membership here, but we get paid. The facility gets paid $3 for every visit they have in the building, up to 10 visits a month. So I have to turn in that attendance as well, and obviously we don't get paid if I don't turn that in, so that's the other thing I worked on today. And then there are a few other things that I got involved in, but those are probably the biggest ones for the day. So definitely never 2 days alike for this position. So, all right, sorry, that's long-winded to that, but that's what I do.
Okay, so moving into kind of the team and teamwork aspect,
Sure.
From what we've learned in class. How do you effectively communicate with your staff, whether that be the welcome desk workers, which are typically students and other community members, and then also with kind of your head staff, which is obviously like Heather, Jill, Steve?
Sure. The one thing that I found I'll talk about with the staff that directly report to me first. They're all different. So Heather is definitely, if I want to get a hold of her, I send her an email. Steve is usually a text. Heather or Jill is usually a text. So the first thing I do is figure out what their preferred method of communication is. That's kind of the emergency type communications that we do. We do meet once a week as a group and as a team, and we talk about what's going on in the building, things that are needing to be shared amongst the group. So that's another probably major form of communication that we have. A lot of it's face-to-face, I would say. So when we're working day-to-day, I'm not going to send them an email or a text. I'm going to go find them if I can. That's probably the quickest way and the most effective for me. There are also like communication type things that if things are happening right now and I see it could be a potential issue, we're going to talk about it sooner than later. So face to face is what I typically do, and sooner than later is what I like to do. I don't like to ignore things. As far as the rest of the staff, I try really hard to minimize my communication to like the welcome desk staff, staff that reports to Heather, because I feel like they're their bosses and that communication needs to come from them. If it's something serious enough that I feel like I need to jump in, I'll do that, but I like to limit that so that if I do have to do that, then maybe it's, gotten to it's gone from, it's not getting clearly communicated from for whatever reason by the other staff, that then I'll step in and, make it should be more effective then if I have to do that. But typically that's going to be face to face if I have to jump in for that.
So definitely trying to like build those different levels of management.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
That's important to me. That's
okay. And then how do you handle then conflicts, whether it be like with an employee, fellow team member, or even with obviously members? I know from working here that sometimes there's problems, but if you could maybe talk about how you handle that, and then maybe even give some examples when you come here.
Sure. Conflict. I wrote some notes here too. Probably the first thing I do. What?
Oh, it's down at the bottom of chapter 2.
Oh, actually, I did find it. So, probably the most important thing that I do, that I feel like I need to do first, is to get as many facts as I can regarding the incident situation, whatever it is. I always know that there's two sides to every story, so I try to get both sides before I even decide what's going to be done about the situation, if anything's going to be done about the situation. I mean, in some cases, we'll decide to do nothing. But if it's a situation where it's not going to get better, or we feel it needs to be addressed, I get the facts, I get both sides if I can, and then I'll decide who needs to be in on the conversation, the next conversation, and then we'll sit down and have a face-to-face conversation. Conflicts, let me see if there's some, oh man, we have these all the time. One that just jumps into my mind, you probably could come up with some too, but one that jumps into my mind quickly was several years ago, there was a gentleman who was extremely upset about swimming lessons in the pool at 5:30 on a Tuesday or Thursday, whatever he happened to be in. And he approached me at the desk and was not so nice about talking about what his desire was for the swimming pool at that time. And in that particular situation, I just simply had a conversation with him about, okay, so what do you expect? What are your thoughts about this? What do you think we should do about swimming lessons? I mean, long story short, we had probably a 10-minute conversation about the situation, but I actually forced him to really tell me or come up with a solution that was going to work if what we were doing in his mind wasn't acceptable. So, I mean, that was one, I guess. Trying to think of any others off the top of my head. Remember any that we dealt with here?
Only ones I really remember are ones with little kids getting in trouble, but
yeah, that happens quite often. We had another one related to the pool as well. Was just recently. We had one woman who came in and used our vortex pool. You maybe know about this one. And she was known to be a complainer about the vortex pool and people in the area shooting basketball and occasionally hitting her when she was walking in the vortex during open swim time. So that actually was really probably one that escalated more quickly than some. Long story short, she didn't like the answer I gave her about coming during specific swim times so that we wouldn't have youth in there swimming and throwing basketballs. She didn't like that answer, so she went to the president and complained to the president and talked to him about how we weren't being safe in our building and that basketball should be kept on the basketball courts rather than in the swimming pool, and we should no longer allow that to happen in our swimming pool. And she sent this to the president for him to address. So he simply sent it back to me. I had a conversation with the woman. She's no longer a member, unfortunately, but we gave her the options and she didn't like them, and so, that's her choice, and we don't like that to happen, but occasionally it does happen. So we tried to work through that situation, give her all her options. We didn't give her what she wanted, and sometimes we can't do that. So that particular conflict was ended in a way that we didn't like, but by the same token, sometimes you just can't work it out. So.
What recruiting strategy do you use to draw in potential employees?
Oh, that's one that I didn't write any notes on. Darn it all. One of the things that it depends on what position we're looking for. So if I would say personal trainers or group fitness, let's just take those two for example. It's difficult to find part-time people who want to be part-time in that they want to come for one class or two classes, or come at 8 in the morning to have a personal training client and then come back at 5 o'clock at night, for a personal training client. So what we do is a lot of times we try to reach out to some of the students, or we try to find some of those stay-at-home type moms, I guess, for lack of better terminology, that might be interested in just earning a little bit of extra cash. So that's the approach we usually take for that. We also try to work with like our local other gyms in the area and see if there's other people that are maybe working part-time there that could use a few extra hours that would be willing to come over and teach some classes here. That's for that particular category, I guess. For the welcome desk and for like climbing wall, the other like the student related positions over here, what we look for is people who are responsible. We just kind of have that target type person of who would be a good fit, because this isn't just a job that you get to go sit in an office and not be seen and heard. There's a lot you need to know up here, and you have to have some general people skills in order, to be that face of the W for us. So our strategy is really looking for kids we already know. Typically, we stay away from freshmen and sophomores just because we feel like the maturity level or the fact that we haven't got to know you guys as students kind of works against us sometimes. So kind of market towards the juniors, seniors, sometimes sophomores. So now you know all of our secrets.
So kind of like with this soap dispenser situation, how do you go about handling that or any other type of situation where your employees are underperforming?
Well, that particular one, I usually try to decide, is this a high need? Is this a medium? Is this something, what's the urgency? Do I need to do something with this situation? Soap dispenser one, this is like day 3 that this woman has said something to us about it. And if I've learned one thing in this position, it's that members like to have their concerns addressed quickly. And she didn't feel like we had done that quickly enough. And I get it, although for us a 3-day turnaround probably wasn't that bad. But for her, it wasn't quick enough. So I reached out to our maintenance staff and I said, hey, I know you guys are probably busy, but is this something you could get to sooner than later so that we can move this woman on to something else other than, worrying about soap dispensers. So, and that's just one example of what goes on in the building. That's just a unique one from today, but that's true of anything. We have people send letters anonymously to me identifying areas that need to be cleaned, things that aren't being done, some of their concerns. So every situation is a little bit different. You just kind of have to figure out where it falls on the priority list and how to get it accomplished.
So how much time do you put into training employees, whether that be your staff members or like welcome desk workers, and how do you assess how effective that training is? So do you guys have like, during your meetings, do you ever have to go through like different training for if you switch softwares or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say the training at the welcome desk. I'll take that area first. That probably could be a little bit better. Um, we do start out with kind of some generic, general. Uh, you know most of what you need to know, but I mean, truthfully, I mean, there's a lot to know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of moving parts at that desk. We can tell you some of the generic things, and Steve, I think, has a PowerPoint that goes through some of the general, everyday routine things up there. Jill takes a segment and does the training on the computer piece of it. But there are so many things that we can't capture that happen in a day that to continually train up there, we find it to be a struggle to get everybody to know everything they need to know when they need to know it. Even as simple as a day pass. Today or yesterday, I think somebody had told somebody the day pass was good for like 24 hours. So they came in today assuming that they could use the pass that they bought yesterday, and we're like, no, that's a day pass. That's good for yesterday. Today you'd have to have another one. Just things like that that don't come up that often. You know, it's just non-regular, non-routine. There's no way with you guys only working 2 or 3 hours at that position, being basically 2 to 3, 4 hours maybe max, that you can learn everything you need to know up there. So I would say that's probably one of our struggling areas that we struggle in. Heather, on the other end, with her swimming, her lifeguard, she has in-services every month, and she trains and retrains, and they go through scenarios and go through any changes related to the pool or things that aren't going well. She does, you know, in-services at least once a month with her staff. So that is an area that I think we continue to train on a regular basis, that is very well trained and are capable of handling all the situations that would come up in there. And by default, that's one of our high risk areas. So, you know, for us to have the training once a month is extremely important. So,
How do you effectively keep a good work-life balance?
me personally, or me allowing other people to have their,
Personally.
or both. Me personally. Ugh. Fortunately, my children are grown and out of the house. I have a grandson that demands some time occasionally, but I'll go back to when I was maybe a young mom, and I always worked in a position where it's been non-exempt. It's never been a 9-to-5 job. I've never had a 9-to-5 job, so I've always had to learn how to juggle both, and I think I've came to the realization early in life that sometimes it's kind of like a scale. I mean, sometimes it's going to tip this way. Your work is going to have to come first, and you're going to be spending a lot more hours at work. And sometimes it has to tip the other way. And when it tips back to your family side, I think for me, the natural thing for me was to feel guilty that I'm not at work. But knowing I have to get over that. I'm going to have to feel okay about spending time with my family when I spent 2 weekends in a row at work. And I think once I got over that guilt feeling of I should be at work, you know, even though I just spent 2 weekends there, it got a lot easier for me. And some of the things that I did and still do to maybe help that balance is if I have to be gone in the afternoon or during the, you know, say I had an appointment this morning, I will offset that with maybe working late tonight, you know, or I used to go coach my daughter's soccer team. I'd leave at 4:30 in the afternoon, coach soccer until 6, and sometimes I'd come back and do my office work. But at least having the flexibility, you know, to do what I wanted to do with my family and still being able to do my job, that was something that I managed to do just because I just realized sometimes it goes this way and sometimes it goes this way. So.
Would you say that the W has a strategy in which you try to attract new members?
Yes. What number is that? I wrote
Last
some
one,
things
chapter
down.
6.
The last one at number 6
Yep.
for growing and changing. Yeah. We meet annually and have what we would term our group a strategic planning session. So every year we look at what might be some of our challenges going forward, whether it be the new competition in town, new classes, maybe the competition are adding new swimming pools coming into town. We kind of assess our situation, and we also look at what's going on in our building specifically. So how much is athletics in here? How much do they need the facility? And then what does that allow us to do versus what it doesn't allow us to do? So strategically, we will market certain things. So we, in the last couple of years, chose to ramp up on our senior programming. We know during the day that there aren't a lot of students that are using the building, and at night, when the athletic teams we have pressure on the building from athletic teams, we know that we can invite a whole lot more people in the building. Even, 5 o'clock, 4:30 out in the fitness area, jammed. We don't want any more people in the building during that time while you guys are in class or while you guys are here at school. So what market can we bring in to build membership and still have room for that? So we plan things strategically like that, thinking about what all the variables are, outside influences and inside influences that we work with, and build around those is what we do.
So what type of organizational culture do you prefer?
I had to look up the definitions of that. So it talks about some of the culture, the kind of the surface type things. I mean, it where I was looking, it was referring to like work attire, and that's important to me, although sometimes I don't feel like that happens too often. But like all of our personal trainers, group fitness instructors, they all wear shirts that identify who they are. That's important to us so that people can come up to them and talk to them if they have questions. They're kind of identified. Childcare, same thing. If we're watching their children, we ought to be able to identify who's watching those kids very quickly. Another thing, maybe kind of on the surface type things that are very important to me from a culture perspective, is a clean facility. I feel like that's one of the things that people notice the most. And that's just from my perspective, this place should be cleaner than my own house is, because this is a constant revolving door of a whole lot of people. The restrooms, the locker rooms, I want those clean. When people go in, I don't want them to feel like they're walking into a dingy, unsanitary area. So that's important to me. Same with fitness area. When people come for tours and visits, recruits, I want this building to look nice. Paint, it needs to present itself well. So that's a pet peeve of mine. So whenever I ask somebody to go do some work on cleaning something, it's because I just want to clean. I think it makes a difference for people. More at a different level, I feel like our culture here and what I like to have amongst our group, the staff here, is a welcoming environment. I expect people to treat everybody with respect, regardless of who they are, what their age is, what they're in the building for. Everybody's treated the way they would want to be treated, or the way they'd want their grandparents, assuming they like their grandparents, the way they'd want their grandparents to be treated. That's important. It's also important to find accommodations for people. Like if somebody walks back here and wants to walk on the track, and we've got track out there, what are their other options? The customer service piece of, oh, that's not working. We need to be able to see those things and say, oh, did you want to walk? Can't do it today on the track, but here are your other options. You can jump on a treadmill, you can walk upstairs. Here are the other options for you. And that's just one example. So the culture of, when we say there's something for everybody here, we mean that, and we live that mission for everybody coming in the building. So sometimes it's harder than others, obviously, but that's kind of what we instill, and that's kind of what our mission is, and what we'd like to say our culture is. Let me see, I had a couple of other notes. Safety. Safety is another one that is extremely important to us. So wherever we are, whatever anybody's doing in this building, we always need to be thinking about safety, and take care of something if people are not being safe in the building. And the other thing probably is an open door policy. So the fact that woman my door was actually shut today, and most of the time it's open. but it was shut, she still felt that she could walk in and address a problem with me, and that's okay. I mean, that's what we want to be here for, be able to do for people, feel like their voices are being heard.
In your opinion, what's the best way of going about handling an ethical dilemma?
I'm not necessarily sure that we have this one, but otherwise it'd be on the back.
No, it is actually.
Oh, it is? Okay, perfect.
Yep. Chapter 2, Ethics and Social Responsibility. The only one under it. Honestly, what came to my mind when I read this was honesty is as high on my list as you can probably get. I learned that at a very early age that you need to be honest with whatever the situation is, even if it's going to cause you pain to admit something. You got to be honest with it, and I expect other people and everybody here to be honest. So that's what I try to build here. Morals are important, high morals. It's not really answering your question. Handling. I mean, I guess maybe it is. What I usually do when I find that maybe there's a lack of trust or because of somebody not being honest, what I usually do is I try to, again, go back to getting both sides of the story and then addressing it as I need to address it. So we don't want to falsely accuse anybody, similar to what I was talking to you about before, but I also am not going to tolerate that kind of a situation in the building, because I think once you start tolerating those situations or tolerating that in the workplace, it's a slippery slope for then where do you stop, so understanding it, addressing it sooner than later, and just moving forward from there.
So would you consider yourself a problem solver, a problem avoider, or a problem seeker?
Well, my first inclination when I read this was I'm a problem solver, because I don't tend to let things go. If it needs to be handled, I like to just handle it so we can move on. But as I was looking at problem seeker, I can also see myself in that role as well. Before we put things into place or make decisions or final decisions, a lot of times we'll think about what's the impact of that decision. So if we decide to do this, what potentially could we see as being, some pushback, some negative things that could come out of this decision. So we do that a lot of times before we put like a new policy in place, or make some changes in whatever it happens it might be. So we do that as much as we can, but if that doesn't work, or if something happens obviously that we couldn't foresee or didn't foresee, I'm definitely then going to be the problem solver. I am definitely not the problem avoider.
What would you say is the key to handling stress as a manager?
I think the biggest key for me, and I guess I can just speak for myself, is surrounding myself with good people. I learned early on that I cannot be the best. I can't do everything great or well, even in some cases. Some things I just flat out need to admit I'm not good at them. So surround yourself with the people who are good at those things and allow them to do their job. Pretty much, just empower them to do it. Add some guidance along the way if they need some help, but let them do their job, and that makes your life a whole lot easier. Build the relationships with that person or those people, so that if there are things that need to be addressed along the way, you can have honest, open conversations and get things back on track. So that, for me, that's key to managing my stress. Not trying to do it all, let people do their jobs and let them do it the way that they want to get it done, as long as it gets done.
How do you stay motivated and keep your employees motivated as well?
For me, it's pretty easy. I like what I do, so coming to work every day, I know I'm going to have people come in and do some complaining, but to me that doesn't bother me so much, is that it's when I can't fix it or make it right for them, that bothers me. But I like what I do, so that, in itself keeps me motivated. I have a large variety of things that I do. It's not the same thing every single day, so that's what makes me happy. For motivating other people, I think the key to that is, first of all, understanding who they are as a person. You can't help motivate them if you don't understand what makes them tick, what makes them happy. What in their home life makes them happy. What do they need outside of this place? What do they need during work hours? What do they need to be allowed to do to make themselves be happy with what they're doing? I also feel like being available to them when they have questions, concerns, things they need to talk about is important as well. This may be wrong, but I feel like a lot of motivation has to come from yourself. You either like your job or you don't like it, or you find a way, to make it better. But sometimes if you can't help yourself be motivated, there's nothing I could do to make that better. The best I can do is give you some flexibility in your job, listen to what you need, what you're asking, and help you get to that in your life when you need it. So, I'll just give you an example, quick example. Like Heather loves softball. She coached here at college for a little while. And when she wasn't able to do that any longer, she was offered the job at Waverly Shellrock. So is there a way that she can still get her job done here and still allow her to do that? So that was one of the things that I feel like that's when it's important to listen to the person, where their heart is, what they love to do, allow them to love what they get to do, what they love to do, and then they're still going to get their job done here. So that's my philosophy on that.
How do you maintain a balance between needing to get the work done but also building connections and friendships with your team members?
I think friendships, connections need to happen first. I think once you build those solid working relationships, it's easier to say, hey, I got to get some work done. Let's finish this conversation later. I think you also learn by understanding people. I think you also understand. Lost my train of thought on that. When it's appropriate to say, hey, I can't talk today, or also recognize that this is a situation where you got to stop what you're doing, and it's important enough that you got to go address that and talk to that person, versus sitting at your desk getting your work done. I would say that building relationships is 90% of what we need to do in especially this business, and the rest of it will come into place if you have those relationships in place.
So which communication type do you prefer more? Technology or face-to-face contact?
I think it depends on the situation. If I'm just feeding people information, and it's easy as sending an email or forwarding an email, I'm going to do it that way because it's quicker, more efficient. They're going to get it. They can read it whenever they want to read it. If it's something that's not just information sharing, let's say it's a situation where it's a conflict of some sort, that is not going to be handled over email. That is going to be face-to-face contact. So I think it depends on what the situation is. 9 times out of 10, if it's an email, I feel like I can forward it without having it be misinterpreted, and it's just information. That's what I'm going to do. But there's a certain amount that needs to be face-to-face.
What does effective communication look? What does effective communication look like in your company?
Let me see. Effective communication. I would say I know that we've effectively communicated when we don't have people calling, complaining to us about not knowing what's going on in the building. And when we can sit in our staff meetings and nobody says, oh, I didn't know that, or it's first I heard of it. I feel like we're very good at getting out of our seats, going having the face-to-face conversations, or sharing the information via email or text or whatever it needs to be, so that I know what's going on in Heather's area. Steve knows what's going on in our area. I mean, so we all know what's going on in each other's area. That helps avoid any communication breakdowns, and I think that's what we do very well here, is share our departments and what's going on, so that if we're impacted somehow, we know it, or we can pick it up, or I can say, oh, well, you can't do that because, this is happening. So I feel like just the sharing within departments is what makes it effective for us, and then that gets translated to sharing with our community members.
In your opinion, what are the biggest downfalls of having a manager position?
Biggest downfall. Sometimes I feel like as a manager, I need to work the hardest and work the most hours, and you have that pressure of, if something goes wrong in this building, it's ultimately me, whether or not it's an injury, that could have been prevented if somebody had done their job differently, and maybe that wasn't a direct report to me, and maybe that manager didn't do a good job of training that person. Ultimately, it still comes back to me. So I'd say that that's probably the biggest downfall. If you really stop and think about it, which you don't want to too often, there's, a lot of things in, especially this building, that could go wrong that, are ultimately on my shoulders.
What would you say is the most rewarding thing about being a manager?
Most rewarding, I guess, seeing other people succeed or be happy with what they're doing in their lives. When I talk about specifically students, or even, the Romeos of the world who worked here, seeing him go on and, hopefully having learned some things here, from a leadership perspective, helping guide him through some of the things that maybe he had to work through, be successful in his next job. That's so cool. You guys as students who have worked for us, when you guys get jobs, honestly, and it could have used us as a reference, that to me is really cool. But I just find that's why I come back and do it, and especially especially you guys as students, that makes it all worth it, I guess.
Is there any advice you would like to give us future managers?
Yep. Oh man, just starting out. I started managing when I was 19, probably, and conflicts all the way along. I'd say I could pick out every one of my jobs and pick out at least one specific situation that just has always stuck in my mind. There's always and always will be probably one problem person that you have to work with, and finding a way to effectively work with that person will always be a challenge, but continuing to try will be worth it. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, and everybody's going to make mistakes along the way. As long as we learn from them, and get stronger and better, become better managers because of them, that's the important thing. And, I feel like along the way of the things that I've learned and the mistakes I've made have come from situations where maybe I've made a mistake and I've had to own up to it. And that's difficult. That's difficult to walk into your boss's office and say, hey, I screwed up. And I've always felt like as long as I've done that, I could move on. The things that I would try to hide, they just continue to gnaw at you and build, and they snag at you. So, being honest and getting things, admitting if you do something wrong, moving through it and moving on is, to me, probably one of the biggest things that you can always, will help you the most, I guess. And we're gonna make mistakes. I make mistakes every day, so.
Well, that's all we have for you, so
Okay.
That will conclude our interview. I'll swing this back around. We'd just like to take this time to thank you for sitting down with us. We really appreciate it, and that's going to conclude our interview.
All right.